Hi, everyone. This is Trish Kendall, your host for the Choose and Become the Interview series. So I have been eager for this morning. So super quick, my guest today is Matt Polefko. Matt, just say hi for a second.
Good morning.
Okay. Before I ask you to share a little bit about yourself with our communities, I'm just going to take a step back before we move forward for anybody that's new to this interview show. I made 5 critical choices on my journey from the pit of despair to the peak of success, enduring success. And those 5 critical choices is 1, I made a first choice. For me, that was picking up the phone when my sister called. The second was committing to a 2-way agreement. The third was building trust, first in myself, and then building trust with others. The 4th critical choice was deliberately creating community and belonging. And the 5th critical choice, my most important choice, was to finally embrace my fullest capacity to give love, the verb, and to receive love, the verb, back from others that want to give it to me. Now, the purpose of this show is not my journey. What I like is to interview people I admire and gather their lessons and their experiences and their journey and their voice on the journey to enduring success. So, Matt, super quick before I even turn it over to you, my business partner and closest friend, Jennie Geise, heard you speak at Harnessing Potential at the Cleveland Clinic. She texted me, I think either during it or immediately afterwards, and said, oh my God, we got to connect with Matt. We got to interview Matt. So, Matt, will you share a little bit about yourself with the community, please?
Yeah, absolutely, Trish. And thanks so much for the wonderful introduction. I'm thrilled to be here and chatting with you today. So again, my name is Matt Polefko. I want to share by starting a little bit about myself, starting in my childhood, because I think that really kind of gets to the crux of where I am and why I do what I do every single day. And so really to get started, I'll take you back to a time when I was about 5 years old, and I was struggling a little bit in, kind of like the kindergarten realm. And my mom started taking me to a couple of different doctors. And at the time, I didn't really understand what was going on. I just knew like, hey, mom says we have to go here. We have to go here. And a short while later, I ended up with diagnosis of Tourette syndrome. And so for those of you who don't know what Tourette syndrome is, I think a lot of people are very familiar with some of the more severe cases of Tourette's. Mine was very, very mild. I had 3 tics. 2 of them were physical. 1 of them was verbal. And my 3 tics were, I would lick my lower lip, and I would lick it so much that it would get raw. And I would have this big red line under my bottom lip, right between my bottom lip and my chin. And my doctors would call it my second smile. So I had that pretty consistently. The second tic that I had was I always felt like my eyes were popping out of my head. And so I would just squeeze my eyes closed as hard as I could because I didn't want them to fall out and roll out on the floor. And my third tic was my verbal tic, and it was a constant clearing of my throat, just constantly. And sometimes it was okay. It didn't interfere with my life. For the most part, I did not recognize it. However, it affected a lot of people around me. And so very quickly, I became labeled as a troublemaker in school. So when things would get a little bit stressful or I had a little bit of anxiety in the classroom, I was also a very active child. So if I sat for too long, my tics would start to kind of ramp themselves up. And luckily, I had a wonderfully loving mother who was very involved. She spent a lot of time trying to coach my teachers through, how do you work with a kid that had Tourette's? Unfortunately, they were not very receptive. So it made for a really big challenge in my academic life from a very early age. And so as I went through school, I was constantly, told that, I was a bad kid. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't listen to directions. I struggled quite a bit in my academic space. I have vivid memories of my poor mother trying to teach me something, and I would be like upside down on the couch, just kind of. And so there were a couple of key points as I went through middle school that really stuck out and kind of shaped the rest of my future. One of which is when I got to about 5th or 6th grade, my teachers would consistently tell my mom, he has a learning disability. It's not Tourette's. He has a And so I found myself always going out to what they called, Trish, the dumb box. This was my peers in my school, and the dumb box was really it was the trailer outside the back of the school where we would send people that had either intellectual disabilities or learning disabilities for some further tutoring. And so, being one of those kids that consistently ended up in the dumb box took a little bit of a toll on, my own personal self-esteem. And so I would consistently, go back to this trailer out back, and I would take my learning disability tests and I would pass them with flying colors. I'd have no problem. And so my mom would come back and say, he doesn't have a learning disability. We've tested him several times. There's something else going on. We don't understand why he's struggling in school. And so from that time, I was kind of, just written off. I did, as well as I could have. But there was a very vivid time. I was in the 8th grade in science class, and I had just failed a whole bunch of tests, as I kind of normally did. And I failed the science test, and I brought it home. And I was never the kind of kid that would, get their test back and not do well and be like, I need to go through my answers and see what I could learn. I just kind of looked at it and I went, oh, well, I didn't do too well. And I would hand it to my mom and just kind of await.
Like that was that was your expectation.
Yeah. Yeah. And nobody ever held me to a higher standard in my actual academic life. So I remember I failed this test. I brought it home. I gave it to my mom, and she looked at it and she started asking me all the questions I got wrong. And I nailed every single one of them. I knew every single. And she puts the test down. She looks at me and she goes, Matt, I don't understand. We go over this stuff before you go to school. You know it. You go take the test. You fail it. And then you come home and I ask you these questions and you know it. She's like, enough is enough. So she ended up taking me right up to the school, went to my science teacher and said, this doesn't make any sense. He comes home. He knows the answers to all these questions. I don't understand what's going on. And I remember just sitting there right next to my mom as my teacher said, well, he's a C student. He should just get C's. And that was a really kind of detrimental blow to my self-esteem at a very young age. I was maybe 12 or 13 at this point. And I was already struggling and being told from a young age I had a learning disability when it turns out that I didn't. To have somebody who's influential in my life as a teacher tell me, well, maybe he's just not that smart, right?
And C is good enough for him.
Yeah, exactly. And so as I moved on to school, I decided if I'm going to struggle in school, I'm going to struggle for free. I'm going to go to a public high school, and I'm just going to skate on through. Once I get through that, that'll be it. We'll figure out where I need to go. So I kind of skated through my 4 years of high school. I did okay. Things actually tended a little bit better, but I still struggled in terms of like my ability to learn and retain information. And I was very kind of big into sports, which the structure gave me a little bit of the opportunity to actually perform well because I had very strict boundaries around my. Once I got to college, I was like, this is going to be, I'll be all right. It's going to be just like high school.
And I know you played basketball because you rooted on my little Sammy for making the B team in middle school.
Oh yeah, it's such an exciting moment, and I'm a huge. I love sports. I think they're wonderful, and they do provide a certain level of discipline and, more importantly, teamwork. I can't even express how much I played basketball since I was like 4. The amount of teamwork that you learn, even as you get into like your working career, is absolutely incredible. So I started at my local state college, and I went in, and I took my very first history class, my very first semester. And I failed. Like I got a straight F on my very first transcript. And I remember looking at it, and that just solidified what my 8th grade science teacher had told me. Maybe I'm just really not smart enough to do this. So I said, I'm going to give this another shot next semester, and we'll see where we go from there. And so I enrolled in a basic level statistics course, and I failed that. And so I took a really good, honest look at my life, and I said, I don't think this is for me. I don't think I can do this. So I ended up dropping out. I took some time to myself to figure out what is it that I'm being called to do in life. And I couldn't figure it out for the life of me. And I said, well, I can't just sit here and do nothing. So I enrolled in my local community college. I started taking some classes, and very quickly I said, I've never been a person that's given up, even when I've been told that I can't do something. And so I decided next semester, I'm going to re-enroll in that 4-year college, and I'm going to finish what I started. And so I did. And I had to meet with a guidance counselor, and I went there, and she took a look at my transcript, and she said, Matt, college isn't for everyone. Have you ever considered doing something else? And at this point, I was bound and determined to get through this 4-year school. I was like, I can't not do this. And yet again, another person of relative influence telling me, hey, this might not be your path. But at this point, I was like, I'm just going to do it. And so I chose, Trish, the major that had the least number of credit hours needed to graduation. So I'm like, I'm going to fly through this. I'm going to just be done. And then once I get past the 4 years of college, I'm going to figure the rest of my career out. Like, I just need to finish this because it's going to hold me back forever. And so that ended up being me choosing a major in psychology. And I really and truly enjoy that subject. But to be completely honest, it was the shortest degree track I could have finished. And so as I came up on graduation, I sat down with the counselor and she's like, hey, you have enough credits to satisfy your major, but you're not going to have enough credits to graduate. So you should consider picking up a minor. And I was like, oh my gosh, now I have to pick something else. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to try a couple of business classes. Those might serve me well in life. And so I picked up a business minor. And in my last 2 semesters, I really flew through it. And there was a class that was extremely, extremely challenging. And I fell in love with it. And from there, I was like, wow, this is this type of work that I want to do for the rest of my life in the specific realm of healthcare, which I'm now working in. And so that kind of leaves me, I worked a whole bunch of kind of different jobs during that time. But those last 2 kind of semesters in college, I put myself to a test and I said, I am going to, for once and for all, figure out if my teachers were right or if my teachers were wrong. And I'm going to try my absolute hardest and we'll see what I get. And so my last 2 semesters, I gave everything I had to my school. And turns out I graduated with straight A's. And that was really a solidifying moment in my life because I learned I did not have a learning disability. My teachers had a teaching disability. And all I needed to do was build trust in myself. And I would be able to achieve whatever it was that I was going at.
Oh, Matt. Okay. Hold on, because I am so moved and choked up right now about the whole thing about your mom, about your view of yourself. I mean, forget it. Not a learning disability, a teaching disability. I mean, we could just go crazy on that. Let me ask you this. Did you share this story or part of this story at the Harnessing Potential event?
I don't often like sharing.
I'm just curious. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't often like sharing this one.
I'm grateful. I feel special that you chose to share it in its totality on this platform because it sets the tone for our entire time together.
Definitely. And I feel like my calling now moving forward, and we've talked a little bit about this in the past, Trish, is, I very much so struggled as I was growing up to figure out, okay, I've constantly been told what to do. What are these things that will make me successful? But I very much so struggled with the how. And as I've gotten a little bit older, I've become pretty relentlessly committed to understanding the how. And so when I gave that talk at Harnessing Potential, I really wanted to focus on, okay, here are the things that have worked for me. Here are the things that I've learned or the questions myself, because I'm a firm believer in there's not one right way to do things, right? Different things work for people. And so that was kind of the crux of that talk is like, here are the things or the pathway to get from where you are here to where you want to be over here. And so I don't often share this story because it's a little bit more personal to myself and things that kind of I went through that may not everybody has shared in the past. I really enjoy kind of diving deeper and deeper, and I'm excited to talk to you a little bit more about your framework in really the how of getting from where you are.
Well, and I totally came over the top on you, but what you just said resonates with me, which is everybody really does have their own path. I think sometimes putting words or a framework around that path might help.
Definitely.
If for people to say, oh yeah, that works for me, or that part doesn't work for me, or it worked for me, but I didn't even know what I was doing until I reflected and thought back, oh, I actually made these choices. Okay, so you're launching us right into, I totally know that everybody has their own definition of success. And sometimes I have to pull myself back from projecting what my definition of enduring success is. Now I'm even more curious. what does it mean to you to create enduring success?
I think we have a very similar view on this. And I'll start with actually what it means to not create enduring success, because as I've kind of gone throughout, my life and my career, I never really had a very strict direction on where I was going. I kind of fell into the different things that I was interested in. And I like to tell some people that are younger in their careers as they're going through, I never had a very like super strong calling to do any one specific thing. I kind of landed where I am now and have a very clear direction of where I'm going by trying a whole bunch of different things and figuring out what I did not like, or things that I knew I didn't want to do in my life. I think the kind of the adjacent thought to that is there are all these things that I don't want in my career. There's also a whole bunch of things that I do in my life that don't serve me, right? So one of that is doom scrolling Instagram. That is I did for a very, very long time. And it was funny because I'd always say, oh, I don't have time to do, these creative endeavors. I don't have time to do X, Y, and Z in my work. I don't have time to spend with this person. And then I would look at my phone and it would say, hey, you spent, 5 hours a day on your phone. And I'm like, why?
How did that happen? Yeah, you're like, what?
And you can definitely be productive in some of those tools, but I wasn't. I was just scrolling, random videos, and it wasn't productive. So, those are some of the things that, in my life, I've said, this is not going to lead to enduring success. I have to stop doing these things because they're really kind of crushing the trajectory that I'm trying to set in my life. And if I want to give myself the fullest to the world that I can possibly be, here are the non-negotiable things that I cannot do, right? And then I think on the flip side of that, there's creating fleeting success, right? So you can be successful for a very short period of time. There are things you can do today, tomorrow, that will give you success today and tomorrow. To create enduring success, I actually think this comes from building strong foundations. And I love this analogy of when you're building a building or when you're building a structure, right? And you're looking for soil to build on. Would you choose clay as your foundation? Right. So when you use clay, right, when clay gets wet, it expands, right? And so if you build your foundation on clay, you're going to get little holes all around your structure. That leads to little things getting in there. It can, probably crack. If your building sways a little bit, you're really going to do some foundational damage. And then when clay gets a little bit dry, it contracts, it cracks all around. And so I like to think of, my own habits, my own enduring success as that kind of foundation that I'm building my building on. So when, a big wind comes through, a big storm comes through, how committed am I to doing those things that I know day in and day out are going to make me successful? When that wind blows, am I just going to kind of roll over, let my foundation crack and be like, I'll get it again tomorrow? Or am I going to get really, really excited and really, really committed to doing the things I know that are going to help me as I continue down a week from now, a month from now, a year from now? And I think there are a couple of different things that help with that. And as we just talked about a few minutes ago, there's not one right way to do things, right? You have to try a whole bunch of things, see what works for you, and then implement those in your life. But for me, I've done quite a bit of work trying to figure out what are the things that work for me, at least in this period of my life. And, we've talked a little bit in the past. I'm at the time of this recording, I'm expecting my first kid. The things that work for me now are not going to work for me.
Right.
The whole thing is going to have to change. So it's a super iterative process that, we kind of have to always be working through, and being okay that things aren't always going to be this total idealistic image of ourselves. But I think there are a few foundational things that lead to enduring success and building strong foundations. One of them is what I call vitality. If you don't have really a radiant approach towards life, and you're not able to optimize kind of your energy or your vitality, it's going to be really hard to achieve anything that you want to achieve. Whether that's being a parent, whether that's being the best that you can possibly be as a mother, brother, sister, cousin, grandkid, grandparent, also in your work, dialing in your energy. And again, when we talk about stopping doing things that help you, that's like the first place to start, right?
That sucks that energy. It's like the antithesis of vitality.
Exactly. And so when you think about what are the things in your life that are not serving you, those are probably draining your energy, just as you're talking about there.
Uh-huh.
So that's really kind of one thing. I think another thing is trust. We can't go anywhere on our own. And that sounds like a little bit of a cliche, but as we keep going through, life, one thing at least that I've found is I've always thought, like, oh, I've done a lot of things on my own. Now that I've spent a lot of time reflecting on where I've come from, I've done nothing on my own. I actually couldn't be doing what I'm doing today without having a wonderful family, without having mentors that have helped guide me and coach me through different things, without having very supportive teams, without having a wonderfully loving wife that helps me do the things that I want to do and live the life that I want to live. And so building those trusting relationships, I think, is a critical component of building a strong foundation for enduring success.
You've already shared with us an example of a first choice that you made that impacted your journey to enduring success. Stopping doom scrolling on Instagram. I mean, forget about if I just pick that up for a second, because I'm going to go on a little itty bitty tangent on that, which is I'm supposed to be on for my business on those social media sites, but I'm terrible at it. But I find the same energy sucking when it comes to, even articles or news or what's going on in the world. So I just think that that's a great actionable nugget of making the choices that are going to impact. And what you said there is you decided what was not serving you. You were aware of what would serve your journey to enduring success. And I think that first part is so important because it's very intentional. And then you can be aware of when you're maybe getting off the beaten path. And what I heard is you made the choice of you're not letting yourself off easy. Like, you know where you want to be. And if you're doing something or allowing something that is getting you off that path, you're really serious about it.
And we're always going to get off that beaten path.
Yes.
Life is so volatile. Things happen every single day. We're always trying to constantly redirect ourselves to getting back on that path. And when you fail, when you spend...
because you're going to... Sorry. Yeah.
When you spend 3 hours doom scrolling Instagram after you just said 3 days ago that you're going to stop, it's okay. It doesn't mean that it was just one little mistake, and then get yourself back on the horse and keep going down that path.
Okay, so now let's go to, I started taking us there, but the first critical choice. So when I think about creating enduring success, there's these 5 critical choices. Now, it's not linear, it's not sequential, but I've laid it out linear and sequential, but you've already started talking about these choices. Is there a first choice, whether practical or profound, outside of the Instagram choice we just talked about, that really impacted your definition of and your journey on enduring success?
Definitely. And so when I think back to my time in college, when I was trying to finish my undergrad, and there was kind of that pivotal point where I'm just like, Matt, you need to figure out, what is it? Is it, you're not really that great at this stuff, or you've just been told you're not this great at this your entire life? And so I mentioned before, I gave everything I possibly could to those kind of last 2 semesters in school. And, knowing what I know now about building self-esteem and building confidence, I don't know that I would have quite gone in with as much gusto as I did, because that if I failed, that could have been extremely kind of detrimental to my own self-esteem. But one thing that I did learn from that is I need to put myself out there, right? No matter how much I potentially can get burned, because when I finally do reach that point of wherever it is that I'm going, the healing that comes along with that is going to completely outweigh any burn that I've had throughout the time. And so one other example that I think of this is dating, actually. And so when I was quite a bit younger, I was a hopeless romantic. And I was really looking for, at a very young age, somebody that I could be with for an extremely long time. And I said to myself, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to do this alone. I feel like I have so much to give in a relationship, and I'm so ready to have this other person in my life. And so I said, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to, date, do whatever, give whatever relationship is in front of me my full attention. And I'm just going to throw myself at it. And, if I get burned, that will be okay. Because when I find that person, my person, it's going to make everything else worth it. And so that's what I did. And, luckily I ended up finding my wife pretty quickly. We've been together for, about 11 years now.
Wow.
I can't say enough. It was worth every moment of, hurt, heartbreak, all of those things.
And that is a major choice to go all out. I have to say, wait, will you tell me your wife's name?
Solmia.
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 Oh, beautiful. I gotta say, like, what young woman isn't just thinking about can't all the guys be like Matt? So you guys were both lucky to find each other and amazing. And the choice of, even if I am burned, I am still choosing to go all in, which, oh my gosh, that gets me to my fifth choice too, about giving all your love, right? Because a lot of times we withhold because we're nervous or we're not ready or whatever. So right away, you made that choice of, I'm giving all I have in this situation with this person, regardless of the outcome.
And I think that applies to, more than just relationships. It applies to your work. There are things that we're always a little nervous or maybe scared to do in our professional lives. And they're really not that scary once you get into it. We tend to be more scared of the idea than we are of actually getting started.
Yeah. Go on. Keep going.
You really kind of push those things off and say, oh, I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to do it tomorrow. It kind of builds up in your head and becomes something much, much bigger than it is. But if you kind of approach that situation as, I'm going to give this my all. And if I fail, I'll learn something and I'll take that and I'll go try it again.
Yeah.
And if I fail, I'm going to learn something else. You can't lose in those situations, even if you get burned. And then when you finally get to your destination, in addition to achieving whatever success it is that you're looking for, you also have all of these little learnings that apply to the entire rest of your life that you gathered along the way.
The second critical choice that I made on my journey was to commit to a two-way agreement. And that agreement was between me and my sister and her husband. And we really entered into almost a near contractual agreement. I now know, over the last 25 years since then, that we all enter into two-way agreements, informally and formally, all the time. What I experienced way back then, and I'm so grateful I did experience this in my early 20s, is that the power of the agreement is through the commitment of it. And for me, once I chose to commit, I had to actually choose to commit to the agreement. Once I chose to commit to the nuances of that agreement, my feeling of, oh my God, I have to do these things, really transformed to, I want to do these things. And at that time in my life, what I experienced through that commitment is the joy in the ordinary. And I've kept that with me forever. So let's talk a little bit about two-way agreements. Will you share with us one of the agreements that you've entered into, or even just your thoughts on two-way agreements and what you give and what you get?
Definitely. And I think this is almost mutually exclusive with love. And I think, we'll probably talk about that a little bit later. But, I think of my first true two-way agreement as the time that I moved in with my wife. And for anybody that's moved in with somebody that you haven't lived with before, that's no family, even if it's just a roommate, there are significant adjustments that you need to make in your life. Your habits do not always align with their habits, and their habits don't always align with yours. And so when we first moved in together, it was a struggle. I think it is for a lot of people. She grew up in a household where everything had to be everything had to be very neat, very perfect. Everything had to be squeaky clean. I was a rambunctious kid. I was always out playing basketball, rolling around in the dirt, whatever. I didn't really mind that.
You were upside down while your mom was talking to you.
Yeah, upside down while I'm
Right.
trying to learn something. Yeah, I was all over the place. And so that led to, lots of messes around my house. And, my poor mom and dad couldn't keep up with the amount of messes between my sister and myself that we would make. And so I was okay with, our house being a little lived in, as people like to say. And she was very particular, and things have to go in a certain place and look a certain way all the time. And that led to what I now realize is an unfair division of responsibility. My expectation and, my standard of living in my house was far different than hers. And so instead of kind of having that, mutual respect when we first started, I had the viewpoint of, oh, if she wants the house to look that way, then, she can do it. That's okay.
Yeah, right.
I now realize that is totally insane. Like totally insane. We both live in the house, and we actually have to create a new vision of what we want our lives to look like. And I think that's where we kind of tie back to love is, this isn't really about how I want our house to look like or how she wants our house to look like. She has this vision. I love her with all of my heart. I want to make her happy. So that's when we sat down and we said, okay, we need a better division of responsibility, right? So really sitting down and committing and saying like, hey, I'll do the laundry, the trash, this, that, and everything else. And, your main ones will be this, this, and this. And, it's funny when you're a young and first moving in, that sounds like a good plan. And then, life hits you. Stability doesn't work almost at all. And so that's when it comes down to really having that conversation of, hey, we'll both do our absolute best, but it's not going to be 50-50 every day of the week.
Yep.
Every month of the year, every year of this decade. Sometimes it's going to be 90-10. Sometimes it's going to be 100-0. And you just need to have some love and some grace during that time to pick up the slack when your partner's going through a really, really tough time. And vice versa. I've always struggled to kind of receive any sort of help in my life. And so when she would do things for me, it would make me very, very anxious. And I would be like, oh my God, I feel terrible because she thinks she has to do these things for me. But for her, that was an act of love. And so now we have this, it's kind of like a fun game. And it's based off of what an ancient philosopher, Rufus, once said is, there are really some foundations to love that you have to have. And once you meet those points of mutual caring, you should strive to outcompete each other every single day. And so we have this fun game now in our lives, and it will get very interesting in the next months as we expect a kid, is we try to outcompete each other every single day. Even in the small, mundane little things, it's now become more of a lighthearted competition of like, who can do more for each other? How can we continue to compete and express our love as we move forward in our relationship? And, she wins most days. Editor, as am I. But, again, some days it's 90-10, some days it's 50-50. It really all depends on what phase of your life that you're in.
So the example that you just gave, because I'm just going to get right into it about choosing to give and receive love. Yeah. You say, I love her with all of my heart, and I choose to give love the verb by doing more physically in the house in a way that she will appreciate. I think those two things are mutually exclusive. I don't know that you might love her with your whole heart and still choose not to give all your love in that way. And that is my point. That is my message. When all is said and done, you are choosing love the verb. And it manifests for you and your wife as taking out the trash one day, maybe cleaning up, vacuuming another day. And it also manifests in the understanding and the embracing that it's not 50-50, And then I'm just totally repeating what you said. Then you're upping the ante. And I'm going to say to everyone in my community, take this from Matt. You're upping the ante by saying, not only am I going to give, but I'm choosing to receive all her love, because that's kind of harder. And we're going to compete on who can give and receive more. That's amazing.
And, the other thing that, as we're kind of talking this through, I'm thinking is this is, love expressed in a romantic relationship, right? And when people hear the word love, and you talk about love being a choice, which I 1000% agree with, it is
across our lives,
1000% choice that we have to choose, by the way, every single day. It's not like a one-time commitment. It is a daily, moment to moment to moment to moment commitment.
100%.
But I think when a lot of people hear the word love, they think, oh, those are deep romantic feelings for a partner,
right?
A child, or a mother.
Or child, right?
And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think there are a couple of different phases we have of love. One is certainly, actually, I think that the foundational component of love is actually love for ourselves. And I would actually argue that you can't have any of the other forms of love until you actually do the work to love yourself. And we can talk about that more. It's interesting. From there, I mean, you have those romantic feelings for potentially a partner. You have those feelings of protection and intense care for a child or grandmother or somebody else in your life that's very close or friends. But then one thing that I really, really like, Barbara Fredrickson talks about this a lot, is micro moments of positivity resonance. And these are what I like to think of as like micro moments of love. And this is for everybody. So if you're out in the store and you see, you're going to check out, places still have checkout counters, and you come across the cashier, instead of just, sitting there on your phone scrolling while they're doing all of your things, how can you make that person's life, day,
micro moment?
And it's as easy as just a quick smile, asking how their day was, being truly invested in that 1, 2, 3 moments that you have with that person. And so I think oftentimes we kind of put love in a box and we say, love is only for my family, my friends, my kids, my partner. When really we have enough love to kind of go around for everybody we come across in our lives.
Wait, but hold on, because I want more time with you. Because what you just said is, I think love begets love. And there was for so long in my life that I believed I had a finite capacity to give love. It's like I only had so much inside of me, if you think about it as a physical manifestation. And I was afraid that if I gave, not only would it be, not received in the way that I wanted to, but I was afraid that it would go away. But in fact, we know that the more you give, the more you have. It's like it fills it up, right?
Absolutely. And eventually you get to the point where, and I like to talk about this quite a bit, is like you're talking about, is generative. It's not it actually is like a bank account, right? So when you're taking a look at your bank account, and there's kind of one train of thought that you can overdraft on, right? You give it away, you're going to overdraft, and then you're going to get hit with a whole bunch of fees, and then you have to fight the bank trying to get your money.
And if you're like me, you're not looking at those little hidden fees that are coming.
Exactly. And then you end up in a weird place. But I think on the flip side of that, if you kind of think of love as something that you by that I don't mean that you hoard love, but you look for love in the little different places, and you kind of build those up. At some point, your bank account, although maybe it's not much, so maybe not the best analogy, it'll start generating interest, right? And so that interest or that love becomes generative. And over time, you're going to build up this big wealth of love, which, to be completely honest, I think is probably the most noble thing that we can do.
I embrace and believe that with my whole heart. So for everyone watching, think love the verb across your whole lives. It manifests all the time at work. It manifests all the time. Whether we choose to actually give in that moment or we choose not to is up to us. I mean, whether it's listening to somebody, giving constructive feedback, opening up the door, sitting next to someone, whatever it is. I had this whole thing I posted a while ago that Jenny and I posted around me being at the Kohl's line. So to your point, but it was the Amazon return line, and how I didn't give love, but somebody else in the line did. So it's all around us. The third critical choice that I made, we've already been talking about, but I want to get deliberate is around building trust. So for me, when I made the choice, I was really choosing to build trust in myself because I had none. And this was a long time ago, but I did not trust myself, nor did I trust anyone around me except my sister. But so I had to first start with building trust in myself. And then that led to inspiring the trust of others. Now, for me, I learned that trust is in the small things. And because I was really deliberate about making good, small choices every day, it built up my trust in myself. You brought up trust in the beginning around enduring success, energy and vitality, and trust. And that almost like it takes two hands to clap when you think about your journey. Will you dive in a little bit more and give us more of your perspective on building trust in yourself and or inspiring the trust of others?
Yeah, definitely. And, you mentioned at the beginning that you have this framework and they're not as sequential. They're laid out,
Right.
but they're not as sequential as we might think. And,
Right.
for me, I'm picturing this framework in my head as almost a Venn diagram, right? And so I actually like to go through this in kind of two ways. The first is we talked about, in order to achieve those other kind of like levels of love, love for your partner, and then love for your coworkers, and then love for everybody else that's kind of out there. You need to be able to love yourself first. And I think that is one of the foundational elements of building trust. And so when we need to build trust in ourselves, and this is something that I've struggled with for a very, very long time, consistently in the past being told, maybe this isn't for you. Maybe you should consider,
Right.
maybe you're just a C student. Those thoughts just ruminated in my head for years and years and years, and brought me to a point of every single action that I did, every single interaction that I had this voice. Maybe this isn't for you. Maybe you're not good enough to do this. And that is a great way to not build trust in yourself. And it's not until we, kind of take control of what that little voice in our head says, that we can actually permanently change our lives for the better. And so self-talk is one thing that I'm a huge advocate about. And if you try self-talk at home, it is the silliest thing that you're ever going to do, because it sounds crazy. It really, really does. And so I started with just tiny little things in my day. And one thing I really like, there's this guy, his name's Lanny Basham. If anybody's heard of him, he's an Olympic gold medalist, and now he's a world-class Olympic coach. And he talks all about how you build your own self-esteem over time and build trust in yourself. And, one thing that he likes to say is, when you do something good in your day, when you have a win, and sometimes that's just getting out of bed on time, right? You should celebrate that like you just scored the winning touchdown at the Super Bowl, right? He likes to say, that's like me. Build this reservoir of confidence in yourself. And when you first start, it sounds so silly. It feels so silly. You're like, what am I doing? Like, this is something that, people don't do. And over time, my mom would always say, if you tell yourself something enough, you start to believe it. For me, that works negatively very early in my life. When people told me, maybe you're not cut out for this, I believed it over time, right? So why wouldn't it work in the opposite direction? If I'm consistently celebrating even my smallest of wins, saying things like, that's like me, or when I do something positive in my day, giving myself a little bit of a pat on the back and really getting that, Super Bowl winning-esque feeling in my head, it really starts to build your own confidence and self-esteem. And, my wife will laugh at me because if I have a really good workout, or when I finish my workout, or I do like a really good set, she'll hear a woo in the basement. And she'll be like, oh, did you have a good workout? And it feels silly. It truly, truly does. It works. And so some of my favorite ones that I like to say, especially when I catch myself ruminating, I think that's a huge component of this, is when you catch yourself ruminating, saying stop, and then having a mantra that you can rely on to replace those negative thoughts in your head. And one that's worked really well for me, especially when I'm having times where I'm feeling maybe a little bit inadequate, or like I wasn't prepared to be in a situation, is I love myself. That is one of my absolute favorite mantras that replays in my head again and again and again. And there's a million of them out there. There's a great book. It's called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. It's by Chad Hamsler. It's a wonderful book. It's filled with lots and lots of examples of things you can say in your head to build positive self-esteem. So that's really one thing that I've focused on, quite a bit. And then I think when we talk about having or inspiring trust in others or having others inspire trust, it really,
yes, right. Or exactly what you just said, or how does someone else inspire your trust? Yes.
exactly. And I think that really comes down to a couple of components. The first is I love How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And, this one also feels a little silly to me, but he says, hey, what is, one person that pretty much everybody loves? And the answer is a dog, right? Why do we like dogs so much? Well, as soon as you walk through the door, there's never been anybody in your entire life that's happier to see you, and they can't hide, right? They get this big grin on their face. They're super excited, bouncing all around, wiggling. Their tail is a telltale sign going a million miles a minute. But we don't do that as human beings, right? We don't bring that sort of energy to our relationship, even when we genuinely are excited to see people.
We hold back.
We do.
Even when we feel it, it's like, oh, no, I can't express it. They'll feel like that's funny,
Yes.
or maybe that's too much.
And that behavior is often ostracized. But at the end of the day, when we go back to talking about, like, I'm willing to be burned as many times as it takes to get to wherever it is that I'm trying to fulfill my mission, that's part of it. The right people respond well to that. And to be completely honest, even if you don't get a good reaction, you probably left that person with a micro moment of positivity resonance in their day, right?
Oh my God. Love it, Matt. I have this picture. You know what? It's not here. It's downstairs. A picture of a dog that's looking, I use this for some of my workshops around active listening.
Yeah.
And this cute dog is like looking up at you with the big brown eyes. And I use it and I say, be the dog.
Yeah.
Meaning we talk to our dogs because they are such great listeners. I'm going to change it now. And I'm not going to change it, but I'm going to use it now with this about be the dog, give your love.
Yes.
Like that is, which builds trust. It inspires trust. There's nothing that can build trust more than creating an environment of intimacy, professional intimacy. And, like just showing up in a way that you are not holding back, be the dog.
Absolutely. And, you just said two words that I think are kind of the second piece of having others inspire trust in you. And it's showing, being present in two ways. One, physically. We tend to trust people that we're frequented by more often than we don't, when we don't see people. So that's one, being there physically. But the second piece of showing up is truly showing up. So, when I come home after a long day of work, and, it's time for me to kind of shut down, not think about work anymore. I put my phone in my kitchen drawer and I close that. And that's the end of that thing. I'm done. Now I'm going to focus on my wife, my friends, any other work or extra kind of curricular activities that I do afterwards. Being present in that moment, and as you were just talking about in your active listening, that's kind of like the second component of showing up. So being there physically is step one, right? And then being there mentally is step two. And so, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on what does it mean to show up? What are the things that I do? What's my eye contact look like? What's my body language look like? How am I actually listening so that somebody actually feels heard? And it's not always about me solving their problems. It's about just having that conversation that kind of inspires trust. So I really think that's the second thing. And the third thing is, if you do absolutely nothing else, is doing what you say you will do. This is kind of a two-pronged thing where this will inspire confidence in yourself for you, building that self-trust, but also having others trust you as well. And so when we talked about earlier, like, hey, what are the things that, you shouldn't do that drain your energy or derail you? The quickest way to not build trust with somebody is to not do the things that you say you do. And I think often, people's lives are so busy, we make commitments that maybe we weren't totally ready to keep. And we think, oh, you know what? If I don't say anything and I don't do it, that person forgot. They didn't. They did not forget. They remembered it. They knew you didn't do it and you didn't communicate anything about it. And later on in your life, that's going to bury you. especially at your job and in your relationship. So the flip side of that is doing what you say you're going to do. And that's when we talk about celebrating small wins, right? So as soon as I do something that I said I was going to do, go. Like, you got this. Great job. Celebrating, Super Bowl style, things like that. And then same thing when we do things for others that we say that we're going to do. And it's totally okay to not keep commitments. Things change. Things come up. You have different circumstances, but not saying anything to that person or renegotiating that commitment is going to be detrimental. So I really think, being excited when you see people bringing that energy. People are attracted to energy is kind of step number one. Showing up physically, and then kind of, sub bullet there is showing up as a person and listening is step number two. And then keeping your commitments, doing what you say you're going to do is a really good recipe to build some pretty foundational trust.
Tell me a little bit about community and belonging. So how about this? The fourth choice we're going to explore, because I am like done with this linear and sequential thing, right? We're going to think about that differently. The fourth choice I want to explore is being deliberate around creating your community and deliberate around creating belonging. And I've learned and believe that belonging is not an intellectual idea. It is an action, and it requires reciprocity. It requires me to want to belong and you to want to help me belong. Let's talk about community and belonging.
Yeah, when I think about community and belonging, actually, my mind goes straight to friendships. And when I was growing up, I always felt like a little bit of an outcast. Not for any particular reason, but I always felt like I didn't fit into certain friend groups. And I rotated through friends quite a bit throughout, middle school, high school, and then college, and now in my adult life. And one thing that really has kind of thrown me off track is I've never felt like I had I hope they don't take offense to this when they listen to this, but I never felt like I had very close male friends. And male friendships there's quite a bit of, literature out there about, male friendships are historically very difficult to build. And they're often built on things like drinking and video games and playing sports. And so, when I was younger and also now as an adult, out of those kind of like three things, sports was the only thing that I was interested in. So I didn't really have a lot of the same interests as my peers, and that kind of led to me feeling left out. And I have some wonderful, wonderful male friends, but even with them, there were times that I was like, man, I don't understand. Like, I haven't found like that one person that I feel like I can really, really connect with, because even my closest friends, I felt like I was significantly different from. And, I like to think about, like, if the relationships I build with the closest people in my life, these kind of male friends that I've had, are so superficial, what kind of relationships am I building at work or in the community or even with my family? And so it took me a long time to kind of work through some of those feelings. And, several years ago, I was just like, I don't think it's going to happen. Like, I think, I have wonderful friends, I have a wonderful family, but I don't think I'm ever going to find, somebody that really truly understands and gets me. And I've done a lot of self-reflection over the past couple of years. And as I've kind of worked through some of those things, I realized that it's not me that's not being accepted into these groups. It's me actively excluding myself and not allowing myself to belong. And when I think of the relationships that I've had, and I'm like, oh, they're built on some superficial things in the past, it was me that was doing the superficial building. I didn't have the emotional depth to go into conversations that were more difficult, or were maybe a little bit more touchy than things I had explored in the past. And anytime one of my friends would want to go there, I would immediately redirect it to something like sports or, what's going on outside or things that are happening at work. And so just as we talk about, love being a conscious choice that we have to make moment to moment to moment, so is belonging. Accepting others is very, very easy. Allowing yourself to be accepted is actually much more difficult. we kind of go into those relationships saying, well, here's that voice in my head again. What if I'm not good enough? What if they don't accept me? What if I get burned? And a lot of times we actively choose to withdraw on our own and not allow those kind of more foundational relationships to exist and flourish because we're holding ourselves back.
What for you? I'm going to take us back in time. What? I don't want to lead the witness. What does it feel like to not belong?
Yeah, that's a good question. In one word, it's lonely, right? When we're not a part of something bigger than ourselves, thinking about like, if you believe in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that top piece of the pyramid is self-actualization. There's all these other kind of like foundational elements that exist under it. But if we're not working towards that kind of top part of the pyramid, we often feel left out, lonely, and unfulfilled. So thinking about belonging, I think there's a couple of different ways that we can belong. And so a lot of people derive their meaning from their work, right? Which I think is a catastrophic mistake. You could get fired tomorrow, and now your identity that you attach to your job is kind of just floating out there somewhere, right? But if you have a little bit of a higher purpose than just your work, maybe it's being the best mother that you could possibly be to your kids. Nobody else in the world can do that job. And by the way, you're probably not going to get fired from it. So that's like a really great place to start. Being the best friend that you can be, having a little bit of a higher calling than just the work that you do day in and day out. How can you make those micro moments of positivity resonance as you kind of go throughout your day? I think are really a good way to build meaning. But when we lack that in our lives and we don't have that kind of higher purpose or sense of self, things along those lines, I think it's a very lonely place to be. And that can lead us down, as we think of that Venn diagram, or at least the Venn diagram I have in my head.
Oh, believe me, it's in my head now too.
It's everything. If you don't have belonging, it's very difficult to trust people. If people don't trust you, it's very difficult to trust yourself and vice versa. It makes it very difficult to love and be loved. And it makes it very difficult to make very conscious choices and make commitments. And so, at first when I started thinking about the structure, I was like, oh yeah, it's one of those pyramid things again, but it's not. It's definitely that Venn diagram. They all have some sort of...
So hold on. We're gonna change this around a little bit. This is just like one of the little handouts I have in keynotes, but like you could see that, right? Like it all intersects, but embracing love is right there.
And I think it makes sense that it's right there in the middle.
Right.
That's where we need to start.
Okay, so we're going to end our interview with what we have threaded through the entire interview. The fifth critical choice, and actually the only and most important choice, is to embrace our fullest capacity to give love and to receive love. And as anybody that is watching this can clearly see, once you've made that choice, all the other choices, it's almost like not even conscious, because you've made the choice to give all and to receive all, and therefore you make those tough first choices. You commit to those agreements. You build trust. You create community and belonging. It all comes together. But I do want to be deliberate as we wrap up. Are you okay spending a few more minutes?
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we can give this a little bit. What is your how about this? Either your perspective on giving all and receiving all, although you've shared all the way through, or is there, and because I know I can ask you this, is there an example that comes to mind where you made the choice to give it all or to receive it all? to give all your love or to receive all your love? And what did it feel like? And when was it?
Yeah. So when I reflect on my life and I think about a time where I chose to give it all, which I think is synonymous with receiving it all, because, talk a little bit in your work about in order to receive, you need to give, right? And to be completely honest, I think you give a little, you get a lot. And that actually takes me back to a time when I was working one of my first jobs. I mopped floors in the operating room at one of my local hospitals. And part of my role was transporting patients from their room in the adjacent bed tower down to the operating room. And I recall going to go get this one particular patient. They were international. They'd never been to the United States before. They traveled alone, and they had a horrible medical history. They were in a lot of pain. And I remember pushing this patient through the hallways, and even the tiniest little bump that we hit, they would just cringe in pain. And I felt horrible because there was nothing I could do. I had to roll over the bumps to get her to where she was going. And finally, I got to the operating room. I opened the door and I said, "Hey, your patient's here." And our protocol is, or at least at the time, was leave the patient in the hallway and move on to where your next task is. And if you've never been in an operating room area before, they're really, really cold. They're very sterile. They're not bright and colorful. It's all just bare white, or sometimes it's like a yellow. And she was cold. And I was like, how inhumane to leave somebody who doesn't have any family here, who doesn't have any friends here. They've never been here. They are getting some sort of operation done that they had to travel halfway across the world for, and just have them wait. And, the operating room team, I mean, they're extremely efficient in what they do, but sometimes things get delayed. And they said, "Oh, you can just leave the patient out there. We'll bring her right when we can." And I was like, wow, I don't think I can do that as a human being. That doesn't make sense to me. So I ended up breaking our team's protocol, and I stayed there and I just let her cry, let her know that she's not alone. And that actually is kind of what shaped my path into doing what I do in a professional life, because I wanted to be the person that made changes, positive changes to as many people that possibly could in healthcare, to make sure that they can receive appropriate care and they don't get stuck for 45 minutes waiting outside an operating room while they're scared, alone, and in immense amount of pain. And so when I think about that, that's very much so a time where I gave little, but in return, I got purpose for the rest of my career. To not let anybody go through that type of situation again alone, and provide them with the best care they could possibly get. And so from that moment forward, that has always been kind of my goal. And, as somebody who's consistently been told time and time and time and time again, maybe you're not cut out for this. Maybe this isn't for you. That's actually been a little bit more fuel to the fire. I admit that in some of my early career, and even still now, I've operated a bit naive in certain things. And so as I've kind of progressed now in my career, I've been lucky enough to do some really, really cool work. I had the chance to open 2 different hospitals, integrated third hospital, and now work in a value-based care organization where it really is a virtuous cycle. The better the patient's health, the better our organization does, the more resources we have to invest back into that patient's health. And so I find myself very grateful for the experiences I've had, although they were extremely tough at the beginning of my life and I didn't have a ton of direction as a kid and an adult. They now make a lot more sense with conscious decision-making, building trust in myself and others, and allowing myself to live and be loved.
Matt, thank you. Thank you for choosing to give all of your love to us today. And thank you for choosing to receive all the love that I wanted to give. I believe with my whole heart that we can each create enduring success, that true success, that lasting success, the opposite of the fleeting success. When we just choose, and to use Matt's words, it's an active choice every day in every interaction and every micro moment to give all of the love that we have, which will then, how did you say it, regenerate? generative, and then it creates more and receive all the love that others want to give us. Matt, I'm so excited to follow you on your journey. And thank you for spending this time. And for all of you that are following us, we'll put all of the books and the references in the newsletter and in the podcast. Thank you for being along this journey with us. Choose and become. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Choose and Become interview series. To check out more episodes, go to www.trishkendall.com/podcast, or go to any of your favorite podcast channels, including YouTube, under Trish Kendall Speaks, and you'll find this interview and more. Choose and become.